When I exposed my husband's $50 million illegal offshore accounts, my cruel mother-in-law locked me in the basement and set the house on fire. They both laughed, thinking they had ended my life. But I survived, and the very next day, I returned with a shocking revenge they never saw coming. I never imagined my life would take such a dark and twisted turn. If you had seen me just a few months ago, you might have envied me. My name is Maya Reed, and I was married to Ethan Price, a man who seemed to have it all: ambition, charm, and success. At 28, I was living the dream, or so I thought. As an investigative journalist, I had built my career exposing lies and corruption. But I never thought I'd find those same things lurking in my own home. When I married Ethan 2 years ago, he was everything I could have asked for: supportive, caring, and endlessly driven. But there was always a shadow looming in the background: his mother, Catherine Price. She was a force to be reckoned with. At 50, Catherine was a former lawyer turned socialite, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper mind. She had a way of making me feel small, like I wasn't good enough for her son. Ethan always brushed it off, telling me she was just overprotective. I tried to believe him, but deep down, I knew Catherine didn't like me. Our marriage started to change when Ethan's business began booming. He was involved in real estate development, and his deals were growing bigger and more complex. At first, I was proud of him, but as time went on, I noticed he was becoming secretive. He would take calls late at night and lock himself in his office for hours. I chalked it up to the pressures of work, but a nagging feeling told me something wasn't right. That feeling only grew stronger when I stumbled upon some financial documents in Ethan's study. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but these papers were left out in plain sight. They detailed a series of offshore accounts worth $50 million. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. Why would Ethan have money hidden in accounts I'd never heard of? The more I dug, the more suspicious I became. These accounts weren't just secret. They were tied to a web of tax fraud and illegal transactions. I was horrified. I confronted Ethan the moment he got home that night. "What is this, Ethan?" I asked, holding up the papers. He froze, his face pale as he stared at the documents. "Maya, I can explain," he stammered. But his explanation was weak. He claimed Catherine had pressured him into setting up the accounts and that he'd been trying to get out of the situation. "I didn't want this, Maya. I swear." "But you don't understand what she's capable of," he said, his voice trembling. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But something about his story didn't add up. Ethan wasn't a victim. He was an active participant in whatever this was. "Ethan, I'm a journalist. Do you think I'm just going to look the other way?" I said, my voice firm. "You need to come clean or I will." That conversation was the beginning of the end for us. I could see the panic in his eyes, the fear of losing everything he'd worked for. But it wasn't just his career on the line. It was his loyalty to his mother. Catherine had always been the puppet master in Ethan's life, and now I was threatening to cut the strings. The tension in our home became unbearable. Ethan started avoiding me, and Catherine began showing up unannounced, her presence suffocating. "Maya, dear, you really should let Ethan handle his business affairs," she said one afternoon, her tone dripping with condescension. I knew what she was really saying: back off, or there would be consequences. But I couldn't back off. I had to do what was right. I started gathering evidence, piecing together the puzzle of their illegal activities. Each new discovery felt like a betrayal. The man I loved, the man I had trusted with my life, was tangled in lies so deep I wasn't sure if he could ever come clean. Things came to a head when I found more documents hidden in Ethan's office. These weren't just financial records. They were emails between him and Catherine, plotting ways to cover their tracks. It was clear they were working together, and their crimes were more serious than I had imagined. One night, Ethan caught me going through his files. He was furious. "You don't understand, Maya," he shouted, slamming the desk. "If you expose this, you're not just ruining me. You're ruining our family." I looked at him, tears in my eyes. "You did that yourself, Ethan," I said softly. "I'm giving you a chance to come clean. If you don't, I will." That was the last real conversation we had before everything fell apart. Unbeknownst to me, Ethan went straight to Catherine, telling her everything I had uncovered. And that's when they made their decision, a decision that would change my life forever. As I sit here now, telling this story, I still wonder how I didn't see it coming. The warning signs were there, but I ignored them because I loved Ethan. I wanted to believe he was the man I married, not the man who would betray me in the worst possible way. But as I would soon learn, love can blind you to the truth. And the truth, in this case, was far darker than I could have ever imagined. This was only the beginning of the nightmare. Looking back, I should have known that uncovering their secrets would put my life in danger. But at the time, I didn't think Ethan or Catherine would go that far. I underestimated how much they had to lose, and how far they would go to protect themselves. It started subtly, like the calm before a storm. Ethan became colder, distant. He wouldn't meet my eyes when we were in the same room, and our conversations grew shorter. He started staying out late, claiming he was working on important deals. But I knew the truth. He was meeting Catherine. I could feel it, the way a prey animal senses a predator watching from the shadows. One evening, Catherine called and invited me to dinner at their family mansion. "We need to talk, Maya," she said, her voice uncharacteristically sweet. "I want us to clear the air. I know things have been tense between us, and I think it's time we start fresh." The invitation set off every alarm bell in my head. Catherine had never been the type to clear the air. Still, I decided to go. I needed answers, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to reason with her. I told myself I was prepared for whatever she had planned. I was wrong. When I arrived at the mansion, Catherine greeted me with a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maya, darling, come in," she said, leading me into the grand dining room. Ethan was already there, sitting stiffly at the table. He barely looked at me as I sat down. The conversation started innocently enough. Catherine reminisced about her younger days as a lawyer, spinning tales of her successes. But there was an undercurrent of tension in her words, a sharpness that cut through her polished demeanor. Then she turned to me, her tones suddenly serious. "Maya, I know you've been looking into Ethan's business dealings," she said, folding her hands on the table. "I understand your concerns, but you need to realize that some things are better left alone." I stared at her, refusing to back down. "Catherine, this isn't just about Ethan's business. It's about crimes, serious crimes. Do you expect me to turn a blind eye?" Her smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said, her voice low. "Ethan and I have built something incredible, and I won't let you destroy it." Ethan finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Maya, please. We can work this out. Just let it go." But I couldn't let it go. I told them both that I had evidence, emails, documents, recordings, and that I was ready to take everything to the authorities if they didn't come clean. Catherine's face hardened. "You're making a big mistake," she said. "Think about what this will do to your marriage, to your future." I left the mansion that night feeling more isolated than ever. Ethan wasn't on my side. He had chosen his mother and their empire of lies over me. I knew then that I couldn't trust either of them. The next few days were tense. I stayed at home, locking away the evidence I had collected and trying to figure out my next move. I didn't know it at the time, but Catherine and Ethan were already planning their next move, and it was far more ruthless than I could have imagined. One evening, I noticed a car parked across the street from our house. It was dark, but I could see the silhouette of someone sitting inside. I thought I was being paranoid until I saw the same car the next day, and the day after that. Someone was watching me. I mentioned it to Ethan, but he dismissed it, saying I was imagining things. A few days later, Catherine called again. "Maya, I've been thinking about our last conversation," she said. "I know we didn't see eye to eye, but I want to make things right. Why don't you come over for dinner again? Just you and me. Ethan won't be there. It'll give us a chance to really talk." I didn't trust her, but I agreed. I thought maybe I could get more information from her, something that would strengthen my case. But when I arrived at the mansion, something felt off. The house was eerily quiet, and Catherine's usual staff was nowhere to be seen. She greeted me with her usual charm, but there was a coldness in her eyes. "Follow me," she said, leading me down a hallway I hadn't been in before. She opened a door and gestured for me to enter. It was a basement, dimly lit and cluttered with old furniture and boxes. Before I could react, I felt Ethan's hands on my shoulders, shoving me forward. I stumbled down the stairs, landing hard on the cold cement floor. The door slammed shut behind me, and I heard the lock click.
"Ethan."
"Catherine," I shouted, pounding on the door. "What are you doing?" Their voices drifted through the baby monitor Catherine had accidentally left near the door, their plan unfolding in chilling detail.
"She knows too much," Catherine said.
"We'll set the fire tonight. By morning, it'll all be over." My heart raced as I realized the truth. They were going to kill me. They didn't just want to silence me. They wanted to erase me completely. The nightmare was far from over, and I knew I had to find a way out before it was too late. It's strange how time slows when you realize your life is in danger. Sitting in that cold, damp basement, my mind raced through every possibility, every escape route. Ethan and Catherine's voices echoed faintly through the baby monitor they had carelessly left behind. They were upstairs, calmly discussing their plan to burn the house down with me inside. "She'll never get out," Catherine said confidently. "By morning, there won't be anything left. No evidence, no Maya." Ethan hesitated. I never thought it would come to this. I didn't want to hurt her." "You should have thought about that before you married someone so nosy," Catherine snapped. "We do what we have to. Now go finish your part." Hearing Ethan's voice cut through me like a knife. The man I loved, the man I had trusted, was helping his mother kill me. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak, but there was no time for emotions. I had to focus on getting out. I scanned the basement, looking for anything that could help me escape. The walls were made of thick concrete, and the door was solid wood, bolted from the outside. I tried screaming, pounding on the door, but it was no use. The mansion was too far from any neighbors to hear me. Then I spotted it, an old utility pipe running up the wall. It looked rusted and narrow, but it might lead to the surface. I grabbed a heavy metal rod from a pile of junk and pried the pipe's cover off. The opening was barely big enough to squeeze through, but it was my only chance. The climb was grueling. The pipe was cold and damp, and the metal edges scraped my hands and knees. I had to use every ounce of strength. I had to pull myself up, inch by inch. I could feel my muscles burning, my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I would die. As I climbed, I heard the faint crackle of flames and the smell of smoke. They had started the fire. Panic surged through me, and I pushed myself harder. The smoke grew thicker, and I struggled to breathe, but I kept going, clinging to the hope of survival. Finally, I saw light. The pipe opened up just outside the mansion, near a cluster of bushes. I pulled myself out, coughing and gasping for air, my body shaking from exhaustion and fear. The house was already engulfed in flames, the fire spreading rapidly. I crouched behind the bushes, watching as Ethan and Catherine stood near their car, silhouetted against the blaze. "She's gone," Catherine said, her voice cold and triumphant. "We're safe now." Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at the flames, his face pale and expressionless. I could see the weight of what he had done in his posture, but it was too late for regret. He had chosen his side. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and recorded the scene. The fire, their silhouettes, their voices, it was all evidence. Evidence that could finally bring them down. When the fire consumed the basement, I heard a faint explosion, probably from a gas line. Catherine clapped her hands together, satisfied. "That's it," she said. "No one will ever know." But I knew, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I crept away from the mansion, my heart pounding. I didn't know where to go at first. My car was parked nearby, but I was too afraid to use it. They might see me. Instead, I walked for miles, avoiding main roads, until I reached a small diner. I must have looked like a ghost when I stumbled inside, covered in soot and blood. The waitress gasped. "Are you okay, honey? Do you need help?" "I need to use your phone," I said, my voice hoarse. She handed it to me, and I called the police. I gave them my name, my location, and told them everything: the fire, the plot, the evidence I had. They sent officers immediately. When I finally sat down, the reality of what had happened hit me. I had escaped death, but my life would never be the same. The man I loved had tried to kill me. His mother had orchestrated the entire thing. And now, it was up to me to make sure they faced justice. The police arrived, and I handed over my phone with the recordings. They asked me dozens of questions, and I answered them all, recounting every horrifying detail. As I spoke, I could see the shock on their faces. This wasn't just a case of arson, it was attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud on a massive scale. By the time the sun rose, Ethan and Catherine were in handcuffs, taken from the charred remains of the mansion. Catherine tried to keep her composure, but Ethan looked shattered. He couldn't even look at me as they led him to the police car. As I watched them drive away, a part of me felt relief. They couldn't hurt me anymore. But another part of me felt something else: anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. Ethan wasn't just my husband. He had been my partner, my friend. And now, he was the person I would never forgive. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: this wasn't over. The truth had come to light, but there was still so much more to uncover. Catherine's lies ran deep, and I was determined to uncover every last one of them.
This was my fight now.
And I wasn't going to lose. The sight of Ethan and Catherine being taken away should have brought me peace, but it didn't. Their arrest was just the beginning. The tangled web of lies, betrayal, and manipulation was deeper than I could have ever imagined, and I wasn't ready for what was yet to come. In the days that followed, I worked closely with the police. The evidence I provided, the baby monitor recording, the footage of the fire, and the documents I had collected, was overwhelming. Catherine and Ethan were charged with attempted murder, arson, and a slew of financial crimes. The media caught wind of the story, and it quickly became a sensation. Headlines painted Catherine as a calculating mastermind and Ethan as her loyal pawn. But the more the police uncovered, the clearer it became that Ethan wasn't just a pawn. During his interrogation, Ethan broke down and revealed the full extent of their crimes. He confessed to setting up the offshore accounts, laundering money, and even being complicit in the mysterious deaths of some of Catherine's former business associates. He claimed Catherine had manipulated him for years, using guilt and threats to control him. But in his confession, Ethan also revealed something that shattered me further. "She always knew too much," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "Maya wasn't supposed to survive that fire. It wasn't just about protecting the money, it was personal. My mother, she hated her." The words felt like a knife to my heart. Catherine's disdain for me had always been obvious, but hearing it so plainly, so cruelly, was unbearable. She didn't just want to silence me. She wanted me erased, like I had never existed. Catherine, of course, wasn't going down without a fight. She denied everything, blaming Ethan for the crimes and painting herself as an innocent bystander. "My son has always had a troubled mind," she said during her interrogation. "He's lying to save himself." Her cold, detached demeanor didn't waver, even as the evidence piled up against her. Their alliance shattered in that interrogation room. Ethan and Catherine turned on each other, each desperate to save themselves. Catherine accused Ethan of acting on his own, while Ethan exposed even more of Catherine's dark deeds. Their hatred for each other spilled out in front of the detectives, revealing years of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. Watching their bond disintegrate, I felt a bitter sense of justice. They had built their empire on lies, and now it was crumbling around them. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild my life. Writing had always been my way of processing the world, so I poured my pain into an exposé about the prices. The piece was raw and unflinching, detailing their crimes, the betrayal I had suffered, and the dangerous power of greed. It was published nationally, and the response was overwhelming. People reached out to me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The trial was a media circus. Catherine's icy composure finally cracked when the prosecution presented letters recovered from her home. They revealed a chilling truth. She had been manipulating Ethan from the time he was a teenager, grooming him to follow in her footsteps and do whatever it took to protect their family's wealth and reputation. Ethan's testimony against her sealed her fate. Catherine was sentenced to life in prison without parole for her role in multiple murders, financial crimes, and the attempt on my life. Ethan, though equally complicit, received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15. I didn't attend the sentencing. I couldn't bring myself to face him again. Even with them behind bars, the scars they left on me ran deep. I found myself questioning everything, my choices, my instincts, even my own worth. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to heal. I leaned on the friends who had stood by me and focused on my career. My exposé had opened doors I never imagined, and I decided to use my platform to expose more corruption and hold those in power accountable. In the months following the trial, I discovered something that shook me to my core. While going through some of the recovered documents, I found letters from Catherine to an unknown associate, hinting at other crimes and accomplices. It was clear that Catherine's web of lies extended far beyond what we had uncovered. The letters hinted at another hidden account and even more victims. My fight wasn't over. As I sit here telling you my story, I've realized something important. Survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about rebuilding, about refusing to let betrayal define you. Ethan and Catherine tried to destroy me, but they failed. I'm still here, stronger and more determined than ever. This isn't the end of my story. If anything, it's the beginning of a new chapter. One where I use the lessons I've learned to fight for truth and justice. And while the pain of their betrayal will always linger, I won't let it consume me. I am Maya Reed, and I am a survivor.